what it meant to be human, and fixed ideas about the limits of human destiny. He proclaimed, he sang these words, "I call that mind free, which opens itself to light wherever it may come, which receives new truth as an angel from heaven." It was Channing who also paved a way for the appreciation of what religious education, what we call religious exploration today, is all about in Unitarian Universalist congregations. He asserts that the great end in religious instruction is not to stamp our minds upon the young, but to stir up their own, not to make them see with our eyes, but to look inquiringly and steadily with their own. I would add that this approach to religious exploration is not just for the young. Whatever age we happen to be, all of us, we all need to be attending to this continuing stirring of our minds and hearts and a seeing with new eyes if we are to be true to our religious heritage. In his time, these were dangerous words. Channing had the epithet Unitarian flung at him in disdain. These perspectives may seem dangerous at his time, but they might also be dangerous in our time, in 2022. We all know that there are places and powers that are seeking to limit exploration, to clamp down on minds rather than stir them up, to close eyes rather than see things freshly. We can't take for granted our need now to continually cultivate and to practice this perspective among us for the sake of the world. We know that there are efforts to suppress what can and can't be talked about in our schools and our communities. In 2022, Catherine, in 2022, there are books being banned from school libraries and identities being banished to seeming insignificance or irrelevance. We cannot rest in idle when at the same time we proclaim the ongoing and responsible search for truth and meaning. In these times that we're in, it is up to us to actually demonstrate again and again and to safeguard this demonstrated truth that we're always growing our soul throughout our lifetime, that our congregations can indeed be greenhouses for the Spirit. I first truly encountered this liberating understanding of human nature and the power of ongoing growth and learning when at age 17, I began my spiritual exploration in earnest, in a kind of independent study way. For various reasons, I was seeking some new foothold in life that would guide me as I was relinquishing some of the beliefs and understandings of my Roman Catholic heritage. This was both a crisis of religious identity, but also of ethnic identity. For my mother was from Italy, my father, Irish. I felt that my searching and questioning had to be done almost in a clandestine way. I was beginning to sense that the questions I was asking about God, about religion, about Jesus, about my own identity and direction in life could not be satisfied by the religion that I had inherited. And of course, there was much to value in this this Roman Catholic tradition. I learned about commitment to service. I learned about engagement with the struggles for civil rights and about the numinous aspects of ritual and of story. But my adolescent questions, my exploration, took me into reading some of the roots of Christianity, historical roots of Christianity, and the historical Jesus, what was known then, and to reading about other religions and eventually about Unitarian Universalism. And as I reflected on this, I did all of this searching and exploration in pre-internet times. So one day, as a 17-year-old, I hopped my bicycle and I rode to the nearest Unitarian church to me in Sarasota, Florida, some 3 miles from my home. I didn't tell anyone at home where I was headed that morning. I didn't know what to expect and whether I'd want to talk about it afterwards. Somehow I didn't want to answer to anyone but my own questing soul. As I recall the journey along that gravel side of the main road leading to the church, I can still hear those small rocks hitting the fenders of the bicycle, keeping pace in some way with my own determination that was propelling me forward. But then as I pulled into the driveway, I froze at the door of the church. I wasn't quite sure if I really wanted to enter. Would my aspirations match my reality? Would I leave encouraged or discouraged? It seems like so much was riding on this first encounter with the Unitarian Universalist congregation. I still remember the opening hymn, Morning Has Broken. I remember that the preacher reflected on this verse from a gospel passage in John. But the hour is coming and is now here when the true worshipers will worship in spirit and in truth. I remember the words of a reading that morning, cherish your doubts, for doubt is the attendant of truth. Doubt is the key to the door of knowledge. It's the servant of discovery. The content of the messages, the direction of the service seemed to speak directly to where I was in that moment. But I had never actually thought of cherishing my doubts. I thought that I had to avoid them or deny them. And so there was an invitation that was open to me in that morning. Now, I was by far the youngest person in the room. Mostly elderly folks, which means folks who were a lot younger than those of you who are here. Many snowbirds, as they called retired folks who came to Florida in the winters. And just so you know, I was shy then. And so coffee hour terrified me. Fortunately, following the service, I gravitated towards the back of the sanctuary where there was a library. And so I studied all of the shelves and looked at the books. And then I was met by a woman, Jane Smiley, who was the volunteer librarian. We chatted, and she graciously received my curiosity and my awkwardness and my many questions. Following our conversations, she would prescribe a book for me to read that seemed to relate to my particular hot questions of the week. During the week or weeks in between my visits, I would read and then return with more questions, have more interactions with Jane Smiley. She'd give me another book, and that went on for some months. I suspect if I had not engaged with Miss Smiley, if I had not had that encounter, I may have drifted off and perhaps not seen a relevance for Unitarian Universalism, because it was by her engaging and kind presence, her gracious receptivity to my wonderings and my questions, her willingness to be with me in some very large questions that you can imagine a 17-year-old might ask about God and about Jesus and about death and life. She lured me back again and again because of her gracious presence. The point in telling you this whole story right now is to underline how important our interactions and engagements with one another can be. All the pronouncements in the world, all the noble-sounding platitudes and principles, all the list of famous Unitarians and Universalists could not have held me. Could not really have held me as much as that tangible presence of a person who actually listened, interacted with me, engaged with me, shared her own ideas, and companioned me. Jane Smiley was my first embodiment of what Unitarian Universalism is. It was not merely what she said. It was her presence. it was her presence and her openness that brought me in. Now, what Jane did not know was that a year before my trip to my first Unitarian church, a year before our interactions, my mother had died. And this was the event that actually had propelled me into an honest to goodness search for some new grounding for my life, something to stand upon in the midst of the griefs and the complexities of life. So my whole orientation to Unitarian Universalism was nurtured by this demonstrated commitment to this ongoing growth and learning that all of us can be a part of as children, as adolescents, as adults, as elders. Fortunately, when I went to college, the Unitarian Universalist church that I attended was where Reverend Caroline Fenderson, a dear friend to this day, had created and tended a cross-generational community of learning. This week, when I talked to her on the phone and I shared with Caroline, who's now in her 80s, and often tunes into these services on Sundays, I found out, I told her I was preparing for this reemergence camp at First Unitarian Church of Wilmington. I told her about the workshops and the Vespers and the singing and the meditation and the tie-dyeing and the mandala making and the poetry and the drumming and the folk dancing, and that close to 80 people had registered. And she then reminded me of the retreats that she would often organize for the congregation at a beach hotel off-season. I remember those times well because they were rich with learning, rich with opportunities for intergenerational conversations and singing and walks at the beach. And Caroline said to me, "Larry, it is all about bonding. You've got to come together for these meaningful experiences and conversations. You've got to tend the relationships and make new ones. That's what being a congregation is all about." She's right. I believe she's right. This bonding needs constant tending in a congregation that calls itself Unitarian Universalist. Bonding does not have to be a distant memory from decades that have gone by. Bonding with one another is something that we can visit here and now. We often put a lot of emphasis on our individual and personal religion making as Unitarian Universalists. We often pride ourselves of our individual independent thought and our personal uniqueness. This is all true. It's like this sculpture in our memorial garden of this one person reflecting and meditating and sitting alone. Much of how we grow our soul certainly includes this personal, individual effort. But that is really only one side of the process of growing a soul. If attending church, if it's not by necessity, has only become a habit of sitting in front of a screen or a television monitor, we risk the danger of a church that's become on demand and a subscription service and not a bonding community with one another. If we only focus on honing and advocating our own individual perspectives, we risk the danger of shellacking our soul rather than growing it. Unitarian Universalism is embodied in our risking being a community across generations that dares to enter into meaningful conversations, that dares to open ourselves to risking and to have our well-honed habits and perspectives challenged. So ours is a faith that encourages the ongoing growth of the soul. Ours is a church that gathers in soul matters groups and other ways to support and challenge and encourage one another along the path of learning. Ours is a church that provides opportunities for children and youth to grow their soul in the context of a multi-generational community. Indeed, it takes a lifetime to grow a soul, and not one of us is exempt from this holy work, which connects us to what is real and to the reality of our wondrous world. James Baldwin proclaimed it well. For nothing is fixed, forever and ever. It is not fixed. The earth is always shifting, the light is always changing, the sea does not cease to grind down rock. Generations do not cease to be born, and we are responsible to them because we are the only witnesses they have. The sea rises, the light fails, lovers cling to each other, and children cling to us.
As Reverend Larry shared, Unitarian Universalists believe we are growing our souls throughout our entire lives. We are always learning and becoming. But how do the souls of our children and youth grow? How do they develop? Faith development, growing a soul, begins immediately for a newborn. James Fowler, who developed the 7 levels of faith development based on work by Piaget, Erickson, and Kohlberg, states that the earliest stage of faith development for newborns to 2-year-olds is about trust. Trust that they will be comforted and cared for by their parents and by the larger community. This translates into trust in the universe and the mystery and wonder that some people call God. This is why our first Unitarian Universalist rite of passage is a child dedication for babies and young children. During a child dedication, the parents covenant to raise their child in faith and in love, and the congregation, each of us individually and as a group, covenant to raise, to be part of the collective responsibility for nurturing the child and supporting them in their growing of a soul in the Unitarian Universalist faith. This rite of passage grows the soul of the child who is nurtured by their parents and by each of us. It grows the souls of the parents who can rest in the faith that they have the support of a community in raising their child. The soul of each member of this congregation grows through the gift of being part of the child's life and faith journey. Around the ages of 7 to 9, we celebrate the growth of our children's souls through the Age of Reason rite of passage. Children at this age identify with their religion and their religious community. Now, one way I see this is that every year the new 2nd and 3rd graders begin running through the halls and leading the way to their room. They know where they're going, and they know how to do church. They claim ownership of this building, of their church. They are confident in this space. At this age, the children want to do religion. They want to participate in rituals. So we teach them how to play with fire. They learn how to light and extinguish our chalice. We teach them this at Age of Reason and in their classroom. They also learn to sing the song Spirit of Life, which we sang earlier this morning, in part because this is a song shared at so many Unitarian Universalist gatherings. It grows their soul. It connects them to their Unitarian Universalist faith. At this age, our children are concerned with rules. And they're beginning to develop a bit of a sense of morality. They're looking and interested in values. So we encourage our children to consider their beliefs. And we give them scenarios about what's fair, to thinking about what is fair, what is just. For example, is it fair that my older sibling gets to stay up later at night? What do I do when I accept an invitation to my friend's house, but then my best friend invites me over? These are things for our children to contemplate in ways they grow their souls. We use our religion's principles, values, and beliefs to help our children deal with moral and ethical dilemmas, as well as answer their big religious questions. Because at this age, they start thinking about things like, what happens when we die? How did the universe come to be? We do this in community during our Age of Reason meetings through conversations. But at home, the children also work in an Age of Reason workbook individually, so they can consider their beliefs and values on their own and learn a little bit on their own. But also as a family, they're interacting with their parents through the workbook again to discuss the scenarios and moral dilemmas presented. As you use, we recognize the importance of growing our souls in community, as well as providing a space for personal growth. Now, the culmination of Age of Reason, as many of you probably remember, is that the children, these 7th through 9th graders, run a worship service in the spring. And this includes the presentation of their first credo, their first belief statement. What a way to grow a soul, to have the opportunity to share your personal belief statement with your faith community and to be celebrated by all ages of that community for taking such a huge step in your spiritual growth. I have goosebumps. I always love that service. So the next rite of passage for our children, where we're recognizing their growth of their souls, is coming of age. And that happens somewhere between 7th and 9th grades. James Fowler's stages of faith development indicates that these young teenagers like to claim their religion as their own, rather than just something their family does. This is a big step in growing a soul. This is also the age when Piaget's developmental model shows the development of abstract and hypothetical thinking. As a result, coming-of-agers can see moral and ethical dilemmas from a variety of perspectives. But they understand that doesn't mean they necessarily agree with the other's perspective. So, to help our coming-of-agers grow their souls, we provide them, again, with moral dilemmas to work through individually and then discuss as a group. And this helps them see that people draw the line in different places between right and wrong. This helps them see that it's important to think through their own morals and values before finding yourself in a difficult situation. And again, we use our Unitarian Universalist principles and values to help discern our individual morals and values. And another important step in growing the souls of our coming-of-agers is reading the credos they wrote back in 2nd and 3rd grade when they were 7 to 9-year-olds. They're always amazed at how some of their beliefs have stayed the same. And they're shocked at what has dramatically changed. This is an important part of growing a Unitarian Universalist soul and demonstrates to our children the central UU belief that we are growing, learning, and changing throughout our lives. Sharing their second credo with the congregation and signing the membership book if they choose demonstrates their faith development. Unitarian Universalist rites of passage are really important milestones to recognize our children's faith development as a community. But growing souls doesn't just happen in the preparation of a rite of passage. Our children grow their souls, connect with their religion by participating in rituals, being in the sanctuary as the chalice is lit, singing hymns together, participating in the water communion are important ways our children grow in their faith. Sharing joys and concerns during our religious exploration time is another important ritual for our children. Their souls grow when they plan and participate in a social justice project, such as making catnip toys and dog biscuits for an animal shelter, or when our youth group serves a meal to the homeless and the food insecure at a shelter in Philadelphia. Additionally, hearing the stories we tell during worship or during religious exploration helps our children connect our beliefs and actions with our Unitarian Universalist faith. It helps them grasp that our principles come from our sources. Our children also grow by participating in our whole lives sexuality education, or AL, with the opportunity to explore their identity while gaining a sense of trust and acceptance. Being here in this church with their peers is how our children grow. In order for any of this to happen, though, we need the entire community. We need them to uphold the covenant. We need you to uphold the covenant made during the child dedication, to nurture and support the child in growing their soul. We need adults to agree to go to the OWL facilitator trainings. Last a whole weekend. It's a lot of time. And then we need those adults to lead OWL. We need adults to volunteer in the nursery or children's religious exploration on Sunday mornings. We need adults to work with our youth, chaperone overnights, and go on social justice trips. To grow our souls, we need more than that, though. We need more than your presence on Sunday morning. When we have a potluck, a game night, a holiday celebration, we need everyone, children, youth, adults, and elders, to come and take part. Coming together as a community helps us all grow. If you want to continue growing your soul, show up at First Unitarian Church. And if you want the world to continue growing Unitarian Universalist souls, consider how you will be present in this multi-generational community.
As usual, at this point in our service, we ask you to make a contribution to support the ongoing life and ministry of our congregation. To humbly encourage, I'll share with you my reasons for ongoing donations. I joined First Unitarian Church of Wilmington about 10 years ago. I'd always made space for church in my life, yet only after finding this beautiful place and people did I discover a faith community that fit. From the first visit, I loved the services and the opportunity for engagement. Step by step, I got involved. First on pastoral care committee and the welcoming committee, then with stewardship, and by serving on the board of trustees. This year, I'm involved with gardening in our outdoor sanctuary and serving as worship associate. The digging, the collaboration, and learning have been helpful mental health medicine. I needed some emotional reinforcements because within this year, both my mom and dad passed away. Loss is a part of life, and it's such a gift to not go through it alone. I feel deep gratitude to be a part of this church, to be amongst your kindness, as well as be a part of our efforts and our projects. And sending a special appreciative call out to the Pastoral Care Committee. Thank you. I wonder, how has First Unitarian Church of Wilmington supported and enriched you? How have you grown and continue to grow? This church sends us out, touched by warmth, music, education, and wonder. Then we take it into our lives, our neighborhoods, our work. We share it with our family. Our church, this place, and the systems and people needed to keep it running is so valuable. And now, in order for us to keep our beloved First U growing and thriving, there are 4 ways to give. 4 ways are, for those here in the sanctuary, you can leave cash or checks in the box at the back of the sanctuary. You can always mail a check to the church. You can go online to our website to donate, or you can use the Vanco Mobile Faith Engagement app on your smart phone to make a contribution. Thank you for your generosity. Please join me in dedicating our offering. To the work of this congregation, which is weaving a tapestry of love and action, we dedicate our lives and these, our offerings.
Some sing their song for love and freedom. Some sing their song for what they know. Some for those who came before us, and for those we'll never know. So where the light is shining brightest is where the challenge does begin. What gives you hope? What gives you courage? What brings you joy? What brings you peace? So many visions of the future. The first step hard, but not the least. A single thought can set in motion a changing of our driving force. And with strength but not assurance, we can chart a braver course. It matters not how smooth the journey, but the conviction from within. What gives you hope? What gives you courage? What brings you joy? What brings you peace? So many visions of the future. The first step hard, but not the least. What gives you hope? What gives you courage? What brings you joy? What brings you peace? So many visions of the future. The first step hard, but not the least. So many visions of the future. The first step hard, but not the least.
Please join us as we extinguish our chalice. Reverend Larry will extinguish our chalice. I give you these words from Amy Zucker Morgenstern. It becomes more. When we take fire from our chalice, it does not become less. It becomes more. And so we extinguish our chalice, but we take its light and warmth with us, multiplying its power by all of our lives and by sharing it with the world. Please join in singing hymn number 212. We are dancing Sarah's Circle.
Sarah's
for our benediction, these words from Wendell Berry. And the world cannot be discovered by a journey of miles, no matter how long, but only by a spiritual journey, a journey of 1 inch, very arduous and humbling and joyful, by which we arrive at the ground at our own feet and learn to be at home. So may it be. So may we be a blessing. Amen.